Hello and welcome back to Root of Ramose, a poetry series in which we observe the mechanics, aesthetics, and meaning of the greatest founding texts of the Western poetic tradition. Today, we are continuing our textual analysis of the Epic of Gilgamesh by looking at Tablet 7, which features Enkidu's prophetic dreams, remorse and lamentation, curses and blessings, as well as some interesting descriptions about the Underworld. As always, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to let me know down below. So with that, we'll just go ahead and get started with this poetic analysis of Tablet 7. At the beginning of this tablet, there is heavy fragmentation, and so the Hittite translation of prose paraphrase has been used as a substitution in our reading in this standard version of the text. So, to sum up the prose portion of the reading, Enkidu dreams of the council of the gods, including Anu, Enlil, Aa, and Shamash. We get to see a bit of the power struggle between them, as well as their reasoning behind the decisions they make as a divine council. For instance, we see that when the god Anu is speaking to Enlil, there is the suggestion that Gilgamesh and Enkidu should be judged because they had not only slain the bull of heaven, but also Humbaba. So it's made clear to us that the decision of Enkidu's judgment is based on retribution rather than it being a flippant or random occurrence for Enkidu. Additionally, we see that Anu is the one that states that one of them should die, either Gilgamesh or Enkidu. Next, Enlil suggests that Enkidu should die, but not Gilgamesh. This makes perfect sense, considering what we were told earlier in the epic. Looking back at Tablet 1, line 241 to 242, we were told Gilgamesh is whom divine Shamash loves. The gods Anu, Enlil, and Aa have broadened his wisdom. From that we can gather that Gilgamesh is of the initiated. He's been welcomed by the gods and blessed by the gods. Additionally, this decision to kill Enkidu will also be a way of punishing Gilgamesh because of how close the two of them have become. We then see a clash between the gods as Shamash and Enlil disagree with one another about who is to blame for the acts carried out by Enkidu and Gilgamesh. Now, I don't really see Enlil's involvement in the course of the events throughout the epic. If anything, Anu and Shamash are most certainly accountable for the chain of events. Anu was the one that had Aruru create Enkidu, and they aimed to make Enkidu to have the same propensities as Gilgamesh. Additionally, Anu is Ishtar's father, and was the one that gave her the Bull of Heaven in order for her to seek her revenge against Gilgamesh. From Tablet 3, we know that Shamash is the one that placed the desire to slay Humbaba into Gilgamesh's restless heart, because we had Ninsun petitioning to him for Gilgamesh's life. Ultimately, this conflict between divine beings is an aspect of the narrative that has been existent throughout the epic. Up until this point, it seemed that Enkidu and Gilgamesh had been able to avoid being caught on the wrong side of the pursuits of battling divinities, but now the two of them are the explicit targets of the gods. After Enkidu shares his dream of the Council of the Gods with Gilgamesh, he lays down and begins to cry. This demonstrates the hopelessness of his situation, in that he knows that his death is imminent, and that he can do nothing to stop it. Enkidu further explains to Gilgamesh that he knows he will die, and that he will never be able to see Gilgamesh again. Enkidu lifted his eyes as though to the door. He talked with the door as if with a man. O door of the woodland that has no sense, I have understanding that you have not. For 20 leagues I sought for you the finest timber, until in the forest I found a tall cedar. Your tree has no rival in the forest of cedar. 6 rods is your height, 2 rods your breadth, 1 cubit your thickness. Your pole and your pivots, top and bottom, are all of a piece. I fashioned you, I lifted you, I hung you in Nippur. So this is the beginning of a sort of sequence of delirium that Enkidu experiences. With this long kind of obsessive reference to a door, we can think back to all of the pivotal moments in the narrative that center around a door. We have the door of the wedding house, where Enkidu first met Gilgamesh by putting a stop to his dishonorable behavior as king. On the journey to slay Humbaba, in order to invoke each of the 5 prophetic dreams, Enkidu had to build a door for the house of the dream god each time they performed the ritual. And after Gilgamesh had slain Humbaba and his 7 auras, Enkidu took the tallest cedar from the forest in order to fashion a door that was made to gain favor with the god Enlil. I think that all of these important moments are encapsulated in Enkidu's reference in the narrative as he is imagining the door in Remorse. We can recognize the door as having a very literal touch point to various points throughout the epic, yet the reference to a door in this case embodies the metaphorical weight of one's own pursuits and fate. This transference of hatred onto the object of a door is very fitting. It also demonstrates a lack of accountability for his own actions and the need to blame that which is external. In a similar but different vein, the door represents consequence for Enkidu's executed will. When Enkidu says, "Had I but known, O door, that you would repay me," this is a clear indication of regret. Additionally, with the lines, "Now, O door, it was I who fashioned you, who lifted you up. Can I now break you up? Can I now tear you down?" This is a kind of transference that Enkidu is illustrating. He's asking if he was able to create and forge this path leading to his death. He's asking if it would be possible to reverse his fate by destroying the door, or even to not be held responsible for what he has done, as we can gather from the line, "May a king who came after me bear for you hatred," or "hang you where you cannot be seen. May he remove my name and write upon you his own." In Enkidu's state of extreme remorse, he's asking to not have to face the consequence of death. Upon hearing this kind of delirious rambling, Gilgamesh responds by stating, "My friend, in preeminent, to you who had understanding and reason, now speak profanity." Here the use of the word profanity is used in the sense of the profane, or to treat something sacred with abuse, irreverence, or contempt. Most certainly in Sumerian culture, one's lot in life was considered of divine origin, and it was believed that life should be regarded with more resolution and peace than the temperament Enkidu embodies here. Additionally, the Sumerians believed that regardless of one's character in life, all humans went to the same place, the Underworld. Gilgamesh then carries on to say that he could provide a supplication to the gods in order to appeal to Shamash and or Anu. However, Enkidu reasons that because Enlil is the one who decided his fate, that there could be no change because the decision was final. So instead of taking accountability for the choices he made, he blames others and starts spiritually cursing all those that had led him down his path. He curses the trapper man on line 95 to 145. "Under the rays of the sun his tears were flowing. I appeal to you, Shamash, for my life so precious, as for the hunter, the trapper man, who let me be not as great as my friend. May the hunter be not as great as his friend, destroy his profit, diminish his income. May his share be cut in your presence. The house where he enters, may its God leave by the window." After he had cursed the hunter to his heart's content, he decided also to curse Shamat the harlot. So next he curses Shamat, and it's interesting that Enkidu is cursing others before his death, because this parallels how Humbaba cursed Enkidu and Gilgamesh before he was murdered. So moving forward, we see that the god Shamash hears Enkidu's cursing and begins to reason with him. "O Enkidu, why curse Shamat the harlot, who fed you bread that was fit for a god, and poured you ale that was fit for a king, who clothed you in a splendid garment, and gave you as company the handsome Gilgamesh? And now Gilgamesh, your friend and your brother, will lay you out on a magnificent bed, on a bed of honor he will lay you out. He will place you on his left, on a seat of repose. The rulers of the underworld will all kiss your feet." Shamash makes several other good cases for why it is unreasonable to curse Shamat. Ultimately, he argues that because of Shamat, Enkidu met Gilgamesh, and now he will be given abundant libations in the underworld by the citizens provided by the encouragement of Gilgamesh. Enkidu is satisfied by this idea presented by Shamash. As we can see on line 148, Enkidu heard the words of Shamash, the hero. His heart so angry grew calm, his heart so furious grew calm. "Come, Shamat, I will fix your destiny. My mouth that cursed you shall bless you as well. Governors shall love you, and noblemen too. At 1 league off, men shall slap their thighs. At 2 leagues off, they shall shake out their hair." Yeah, it gets a little lewd, but in response to the information, I think that it's interesting how present spiritual invocation is in the final moments of the characters' lives in this text. Overall, the idea of cursing or blessing someone while you are on your deathbed or near death seems to be an existent notion in past cultures, and I guess that the idea of blessing or cursing someone could be seen as a final act in order to gain justice in your own eyes. As we soon see, in spite of being assured by Shamash, Enkidu quickly falls back into anxiety when he has a second dream about the council of the gods in the underworld. There are several bits of information that we can gather from Enkidu's dream of the underworld. Overall, the imagery used in this passage is very strong, and the vivid details are really striking. "The heavens thundered, the earth gave echo, and there was I standing between them. A man there was, grim his expression, just like a thunderbird his features were frightening. His hands were a lion's paws, his claws an eagle's talons. He seized me by the hair, he overpowered me. I struck him, but back he sprang like a skipping rope. He struck me, and like a raft capsized me." In Enkidu's dream, he is met with a man whose grim expression is described as just like a thunderbird. Given the previous symbols in the epic, originally I had thought that this passage was hinting at Enkidu's fate being influenced by Humbaba's curse. And I say that because during Tablet 4, in Gilgamesh's 4th prophetic dream, the image of a thunderbird in the sky was used to reference Humbaba's metaphysical power. However, from archaeological findings, we know that the statues at the entrance of palaces were believed to be the guardians of the netherworld, and they were depicted as these creatures that were composed of lion and eagle. So ultimately, in this passage, we can see that the creature referenced in Enkidu's dream is one of these guardians in the underworld and displays great metaphysical strength. So given that we know that there is a guardian being referenced in this instance of the epic, I think it sheds light a bit more on the nature of Humbaba in that perhaps he is closely related to these guardians of the underworld, considering that he himself was a guardian of the cedar forest. "He struck me and turned me into a dove. He bound my arms like the wings of a bird. He led me captive to the house of darkness, seat of Irkalla, to the house which none who enters ever leaves, on the path that allows no journey back, to the house whose residents are deprived of light, where soil is their sustenance and clay their food, where they are clad like birds in coats of feathers, and see no light but dwell in darkness." So here I think it's interesting that Enkidu is turned into a dove, first of all, a bird that so greatly contrasts to that of the mighty thunderbird. Also, I find it striking, there is a depiction of the binding of wings being used. If this seems familiar, that's because it was used earlier in the epic in Tablet 4, and Gilgamesh's dream about Humbaba as symbolism for his slaying. Again, here in this case, Enkidu's dream is using the imagery of binding of the dove's wings to symbolize death. And it even expands upon the image of complete helplessness being brought into what we soon understand to be the underworld. So the text's conception of the underworld is certainly a worthwhile topic of observation and discussion. From these stanzas, we can determine the underworld is seen as a place where no one can leave, and where soil and clay is the only source of sustenance for its inhabitants. The line, "Where they are clad like birds in coats of feathers, and see no light but dwell in darkness," seems to demonstrate a kind of futile holding on to life they once had, but are ultimately condemned to darkness. "On door and bolt the dust lay thick, on the house of dust was poured a deathly quiet, and the house of dust that I entered." Really, it's fascinating philosophically that there is the presence of death and clay in the underworld, because we know from Enkidu's creation story that dirt was used by Aruru to create life. So the same materials that are used to create life also surround death. Furthermore, just thinking about it, dust is merely the decay or breaking down of materials. So the idea of being completely surrounded and smothered in dust, surrounded by that which once was, that which once lived, is such a congruent and cohesive conception of the underworld. "I looked around me, saw the crowns in a throng. There was the crowned heads who ruled the land since days of yore, who served the roast at the tables of Anu and Enlil, who proffered baked breads and poured them cool water from skins." When referring to the article by Mehmet-Ali Ataç regarding the underworld vision, we gain some clarification regarding Enkidu's vision. This passage of the article is explaining that it may have been an intentional effort of the scribes to include the priests in close proximity of the underworld's gods and goddesses in order to suggest that the initiated resided with the gods. This article explains that Enkidu's death, just shortly after visiting the underworld, demonstrates that he was not of the initiated and therefore could not undergo a metaphysical transformation and continue living. Another interesting point that this article makes was regarding the guardian statues placed within the temples. So this is directly talking about what was mentioned in Enkidu's dream when he was confronting one of these guardians. It's interesting to see that the symbols used in Mesopotamian culture had multiple purposes. So not only could these statues be used to ward off evil spirits, but they could also be used by the royal courts as totems for their possession of primordial knowledge and evidence of their state as an initiated. Ultimately, from the text that we have been able to recover, we see that Enkidu laments the fact that he was not able to have the honorable death of a warrior, and that he was not able to have his name known for his valor on the battlefield. This very much illustrates Enkidu's character as the warrior he demonstrated himself to be throughout the course of the epic. In conclusion, Enkidu's dream of prophecy is like a kind of extended punishment for both himself and Gilgamesh. It's one thing to die, it's another to know that your own death is near. Narratively, knowing that Enkidu is fated by the gods to die establishes a direction and an emotional weight for the rest of the tablet. The knowledge of his own death forced Enkidu to confront the reality that awaited him. Additionally, this discovery of death closing in on him enabled us to occupy a space of consideration regarding the topics of will and consequence, fate and blame, and even the conception of the underworld as it was understood by the Sumerians. With all that being said, I think it's interesting to consider how these themes reflect upon the sentiments of the Sumerian culture, as well as how it can relate to our own conceptions of the human experience as it's recognized in modern consciousness. That's all for this video. Thank you so much for watching this installment of Root of Ramose. If you'd like to support this series, feel free to comment and like the video. If you'd like to stay updated with my posts, feel free to subscribe. Until next time, bye.